The Sixth Axis podcast.
Hello, welcome to another part of our The Year According To series. This is The Year According To Mike Bithell. As per usual, I am your host, Kris, and joining me, as you may have guessed, is Mike Bithell, who was the man behind Thomas Was Alone, and more recently, Volume. Say hello, Mike.
Hello, Mike. Sorry, that's an incredibly awful joke to start the... I'm really sorry. I've wasted your time. I've wasted your listeners' time. I'm sorry. Sorry.
That's where you gotta go. So I guess for you this year, Volume was a big deal.
Yes, yeah, it was. It was one that we'd been working on for, I want to say, about 2.5 years before it released. Yeah, I think that's about right. And getting that out the door was certainly the highlight. Yeah, that was the big moment for us this year.
Yeah, I mean, I've played it all the way through now, and it's a very enjoyable game.
Thank you.
For you, how did that? Because you kind of had expectation now, I would assume, compared to before Thomas Was Alone, where there was kind of no pressure, but there wasn't this kind of external pressure from gamers and from the press as to what the game was going to be, whereas with Volume, you were much more well-known.
Yeah, I mean, that is scary. That is, because obviously, yeah, you are aware that people have expectations, that the noise is out there, but honestly, you just have to kind of, to an extent, ignore that and just get on with your job, right? Like, yeah, I think that was the big thing for us as a team, was just kind of getting our heads down and making the best game we could. And fortunately, thank goodness, it's gone down well, it's reviewed well, it's doing everything it needs to, and it's like, okay, that's we can get our heads back down to the grindstone and make something else now, which is, honestly, at the end of a project, it's just exciting to be starting something new.
Yeah, I know that feeling well. It's always nice when you can just put something behind you, because the last 5% is the bit that kills you.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, fortunately, it didn't kill us this time, but it's certainly the bit where it's both the hardest work and also, like, frankly, the least exciting work. You know, it's the kind of doing the Steam integration, making the PlayStation version run at the right frame rate, you know, doing all these different kinds of jobs, and then not as glamorous and as exciting as kind of coming up with the game or recording voiceover or designing cool levels or whatever. Like, it's all that stuff's kind of in the past. And there's just kind of a laundry list of jobs that he's doing. That said, it is still the best job in the world, obviously. It's cool to be making games on any level. But yeah, it's nice to have looped back into the kind of the start of a project now and kind of be doing new stuff.
I mean, one of the things as well is that you did have that delay with the PlayStation Vita version. Mm-hmm. Would you can you speak about what happened with that, or is that a bit off limits still?
To be honest, it's off limits because it's boring.
Fair enough.
It's just one of those situations where, you know, unfortunately some stuff came up and it slowed us down a bit. It's, you know, normal human beings making things kind of stuff, but you know, you get on with it really. And I think actually, you know, I've spent today actually playing the Vita version through, and I'm proud of where it's ended up. You know, I think that extra time has certainly made that version stronger than it would have been if we'd kind of tried to solve the problem by rushing. And yeah, I think ultimately, you know, players are going to have a good time with it. So that's how it'll be remembered, hopefully. And that's you know, that's the best you can always hope for. So we'll see. We'll see how people feel. We'll see if people think it was worth the wait. But I think we've got a really solid version of the game now.
And as I understand it, with Volume, you were still working quite a, I don't want to say like indie, but more of like a very small one-man. I know you had other people working on it, obviously, but it was more freelancing and contracting work, as I understand the system in a way.
Yeah, it was a lot of us on Skype.
Yeah.
There were quite a few people, but yeah, it was still very small scale, you know, everyone on Skype. I was the only full-time person on it. You know, everyone else kind of came in and did jobs when they had the time, and we kind of scaled accordingly, which worked for us. You know, it was a way of getting that game made. And it certainly allowed us to, you know, keep the budget reasonable and get it out in a reasonable amount of time.
But is that something, because from what I've read, that's something you're looking to change now, where you've hired a COO?
Oh, you've done your research. I like this.
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, we're doing a mix of things, to be honest. I think probably we're going much bigger, and also kind of other smaller things that are interesting. I think, you know, bringing Alexander in, he's someone who is very, very good at all the jobs that I hate. basically.
Yeah.
So kind of the business side, the kind of the organizational side. Like I love the bit where I'm, I get to, work with someone and do awesome work with them. That bit's cool. But all of the business stuff that has to happen, all the contractual stuff that has to happen, kind of to get there, I'm getting bored just talking about it. it's what's cool is to find someone who's a nerd about those things, and that's helping. But yeah, so we're doing lots of things and kind of talking to lots of people about lots of things. It's still way too early to be talking about anything specifically, but yeah, I think we're going to be moving somewhere new. We're going to be setting up an office or studio, kind of a physical space. So yeah, and that's ultimately entirely down to the audience. That's people buying Thomas Was Alone and Volume, basically give me the opportunity to do these things. So it's a very weird position to be in, but I'm just incredibly grateful to everyone who buys my stuff.
Excellent. One of the things we like to ask people who come on to do is to select a few games that they've played this year that they enjoyed. Is there anything that you have found that you've really enjoyed?
I should start off by saying that I've been limited in my time, so
Sure.
I'm going to miss out really obvious things. But genuinely, like, the two games I've had most fun with this year are probably Her Story, which is kind of an obvious one, but just a beautifully designed experience. And just really nice people made that game as well, which is always good. That one just stands out to me just for what it does with the medium. Like, it feels like a completely fresh game. It doesn't feel like a genre game. It uses a lot of clever stuff from other games, like all games do. At the same time, it's doing something very original. And the way that game's structured and the way it uses its interface, it's just really, really cool.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with you there. It's like they've done something very unique, and I like this idea of presenting it as although a lot of people have done it before, but presenting it as like the computer inside your computer, but that's all you've got. It's very nice, and it's one of those games that seems like it should be incredibly simple, but can be very frustrating when you're just trying to get that one word that you need.
Yeah, I think it's very it uses that limitation, because I think it works as well for the kind of murder mystery kind of scenario, just because you're not a genius, and it's a nice way of imposing like a fake handicap against the player, this horrible system they're trying to use. I think it's super clever. It's really clever, and a great project.
I think it gives one of the most interesting versions of police work we've ever seen as well. It feels like it's a very realistic version of what actual police work and finding tiny inconsistencies and stuff is like.
Yeah, it's that nitty gritty stuff. It's something that, I always find it interesting talking to Americans about it, because for me it's so tied to that kind of 90s ITV cop show.
Sure.
It's very, very British. And that kind of, the tiny details, the kind of the very specific stuff. It's just really, it was just an amazing few hours of gameplay that I had a great experience with.
So before we come to your second game, which we'll talk about later, I wanted to take a jump back and talk about Thomas Was Alone, which is obviously released a little while ago now. But this year you had the action figures come out, which is an interesting move.
Yeah, that was honestly a joke that got out of hand. I think I tweeted like a year before, like, oh, I should do Thomas Was Alone figures, like, ha ha ha, they're just rectangles. And then like 20 people like tweeted me like within a minute going, I'd buy one. Yeah. And I was like, and that's when my little kind of business brain kicked in and went, okay. So then we set up a mailing list, and that got like, I can't remember how many people, but like hundreds of people signed up to a mailing list in like 5 minutes just to know when they came out. And then, my girlfriend's a prop and puppet maker for the film industry.
Oh, okay.
So she's got all this stuff lying around. I said to her, like, about 6 months later, I said, so I did this thing where I like made a joke, and could you make action figures? And obviously they're cubes, so it wasn't a massive challenge.
No.
And we just we worked out kind of a price for the materials and everything, and like what's the lowest price we can charge for them, and I just thought it was funny. And so many of my business choices have ultimately come down to me finding something amusing, and the toys was a real example of that. So we made a limited run. I think it was 100. and we just put them online for, I think it was about £20, and which basically just covered our costs. And then they sold out in 24 hours. So that was cool. And yeah, I occasionally people send me photos of like they've got them in their living rooms and they've got them stood around and on their desk or something. And it always makes me smile that a silly Twitter joke just kind of got out of hand. So yeah, it's cool. It's nice that people wanted them.
It's this interesting thing with the characterization that you managed to build into just rectangles.
Yeah, and it doesn't. I mean, I've said this a few times in interviews, and it always sounds like kind of false humility. But I don't think it's that clever. Like like it's just writing. It's just characters just thinking about what a character wants, what they're aiming for, and all that kind of stuff. It's not. It always seems very odd to me to kind of consider them as that is in any way interesting. And the rectangles thing was just because I couldn't produce the artwork. I didn't have anyone to do the art, so it just kind of came together, and it's cool. I'm pleased people love it, and that's incredibly flattering and very nice. But it's just I wrote a story that I thought was good, and I'm glad people got into it.
And then kind of on the other end of the scale, you've got Volume Coda coming at some point, which is going to have the PlayStation VR stuff.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the complete opposite shift to these incredibly basic little cubes going to a full VR experience. I mean, how are you finding that to build as a project?
It's really interesting. I shouldn't take all the credit because I'm working with Just Add Water, who did the PlayStation port for Volume. Really good guys. They're putting that together, and obviously, I'm I'm looking at it, I'm playing it, I've produced all the content for it, all that stuff. But yeah, it's cool. It's been fun because the way we do it is kind of I make a bunch of stuff, and I'm playing it, in my living room in VR. And then we hand it to them, and then they're putting stuff on top of it. So it's this kind of, it feels like we're making it via letter. You know what I mean? Like it's I do a bit, they do a bit, I do a bit, they do a bit. And it's fun seeing that come together. But it's cool, and VR is in itself just a fascinating kind of challenge. Lots of stuff that you take for granted in a kind of a 2D screen experience. Even if you're rendering the most beautiful 3D graphics, like there's a lot of stuff there that changes when you start to work in VR, and just like the size of things. And I remember spending literally a day adjusting the sizes of door frames in the game world so that they looked right for door frames, because it's just weird stuff like that, or the height of a handle, or where a desk is, or how shiny something is, that just immediately you just go, that looks wrong. Stuff that would look absolutely fine in a regular video game. And that's the stuff that I get really excited about, and kind of experimenting with that and finding where those rules are. But it plays really well in VR. It's a cool concept. It started as just a prototype I made over a weekend because I was excited about VR. And we had some Sony guys come over, and they literally sat in my living room and played that prototype, and that was where we started the process. But it's cool to see that coming together now, and I hope it's going to be a nice, cool extension of the game for people. It does some cool stuff story-wise. I think people will dig, and it's a nice bunch of levels as well. It feels fun to play. So I'm excited to see what people think about.
Hey guys, so just to quickly interject here, there are inadvertent spoilers for the end of Thomas Was Alone. So if you want to skip those, I'd advise skipping forwards about 2 minutes to something like 16 minutes and 30 seconds. And that should clear you of those spoilers. Back to the interview. The story I actually find very interesting because you've gone very similar kind of themes to Thomas Was Alone in a way. In the AI emergence kind of stuff that you've got at but I might have to take that out because that is a bit of a spoiler for Thomas Was Alone.
That's a bit of a spoiler.
Yeah. But there are similar themes.
And for Volume, interestingly.
I suppose, well, you get the AI right at the beginning, though.
That's true, actually, that's true, yeah.
It's the opening. Probably can't talk about that, to be honest, because it will just spoil Thomas Was Alone entirely.
I think a lot of people played. I think you're all right.
All right. Well, we'll leave it in and just be angry at me Yeah, anger at me So, like, yeah, you have got these two games that are very, very different in a lot of ways. Particularly if you look at them, they're just incredibly different to look at. But you've got this underlying thematic connection. And are you fascinated by artificial intelligence?
I find it a really cool way of talking about people. Like, and I think that's the classic sci-fi thing, right? That you use a kind of a sci-fi or a fantasy trope in order to explore something closer to home. And for me, the AI side of things, it started in Thomas Was Alone. It was just interesting to do. Like, I always talked about it to people as it's Terminator, but like Skynet's nice. Like, like it's that scenario. That was how I kind of always saw Thomas Was Alone. Was like it's an AI. It's an AI kind of achieving sentience, but that not being a terrifying thing, and that was an interesting angle. And then with Volume, it's an aspect of that world is, the aftermath of an event like that, and what would that do, and how would AIs be treated by people, and how would AIs treat people back? And it was something that intrigued me as kind of a way of talking about people more than anything else. But yeah, it's also computers are cool.
Yeah, that's true.
And Danny Wallace does a very good AI.
I find the evolution of Alan throughout the game is just really and as you say, thinking back on it, it's a good way of looking at people and a person's reaction to an evolving scene, which is kind of very much how Alan is treating everything that happens in the game. He's a very interesting character. It's probably the most interesting part of that world, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think he's great, and Danny's an absolute pleasure to work with as well. He's a really cool guy. So yeah, I think he has to be in every video game I ever make now.
You've got to that point now.
He's was it someone described him as my John Ratzenberger the other day? Like the kind of is it John Ratzenberger, the guy who's in every Pixar movie?
Yeah.
Like you have to do it.
Yeah.
So there we are. Probably have to put him in everything.
Well, before we talk about some of the other things you might have coming next, let's talk about the second game that you wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, so I guess the second game is, and this I'm not doing my street cred any good here, but Lego Dimensions I've gotten into in a very big way.
Okay, no, I can definitely see that.
I really like it. It's a great. Me and my girlfriend play it, and it's a fantastic for me and her because it's just a really accessible, silly game that's got a lot of jokes and a lot of silly humor, and also I'm a big Lego fan, so that's the one. And I think the other thing that really appeals to me about it is that they've used, because I've never really gotten into, I wasn't into like Skylanders or Disney Infinity or any of those, so I was kind of new to the whole kind of toys in game thing, but it uses that basic setup just really cleverly in terms of how it uses that board you're playing on, and moving toys to different places in order to do different things. And it's actually, I was really surprised by how clever it was. I was always going to get it because I'm a Lego fanboy, but then I've found that me and her have spent a lot of money on all of the weird figures and all their little play sets and stuff. I've just got on the Doctor Who one I need to try. But yeah, it's cool. It's weird. It's not a cool game, but it's definitely a fun game.
I think it is kind of cool because it's the first one that, in my opinion, is a real Toys to Life game, because they've taken a real toy and then been like, all right, how can we get this into the video game? Whereas everyone else is kind of like, oh, we make like figurines that are a little bit articulated, which are, they're toys, but they're not, they didn't take a toy that was there and turn that into a game, which is what Lego have done, and it's genius.
I like as well that I think they've been really cool with the license stuff, that it's very knowing and it's very silly, and the way they mash up the different universes and the different characters. I'm a big, I don't know if it's like deliberately and specifically targeted to me, but I am like
just explicitly. The
things I'm into are Batman, Portal. I love Back to the Future, Doctor Who, all these kind of things, and it's like this is just a bunch of stuff I like, all bouncing around, interacting with each other, and yeah, it's fun. I'm having a good time with it.
I am imagining someone sitting down and just being like, we need to capture the all-important Mike Bithell market.
Yeah, that's what it is, I think. I think they've specifically invested millions and millions of dollars in creating a video game specifically for me and my girlfriend to play. I think it's really kind of them. You know, I think it's really, really nice of the Lego folks to target me so specifically.
I think the thing about it is, as you say, it's not necessarily the coolest game, but they've just made a nice, enjoyable game, and that's fine. Like, you're allowed to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's great. All right, I didn't think anyone would pick a Toys to Life game. That's really interesting. Well, you've obviously got the code stuff we talked about, but are you scaling, as you were talking about earlier? You moving forwards with new projects as well? Obviously, I'm not asking you, hey, what's your next game? But
that would be impressive if you could get that out of me at this stage. That's cool.
But you've got stuff coming forwards, right?
Yeah, we've got a few different things. It's always the same at the start of this kind of period. Is you play with a lot of ideas and you see which ones kind of survive the process. But yeah, we've already got some kind of some prototypey stuff, some people we're talking to about things. So I don't know, I'm incredibly excited about lots of different things, but for different reasons. So we're going to see, I guess, which ones kind of make it through. But yeah, there's some stuff there that I'm very excited about, and I think people will be really into.
It's very interesting actually how developers are a lot more willing to talk about the prototyping process than they used to be. Because it kind of used to be this thing that people almost assumed that you had like an idea for one game and that was the game the studio went and made. And particularly like studios like Double Fine, where they talk about their internal game jams and stuff like that. We're like, no, you build like a dozen prototypes and see what's fun.
Yeah, I mean, it can happen lots of ways. You know, like for example, Volume. I was going for a series of prototypes, but then I just got really excited about the stealth one, like before I even really had time to start anything else. So with that one, it really was a direct thing. But yeah, Thomas Was Alone was, I guess, like the 6th or 7th game I tried to make. You know, and the ones we're doing now, yeah, similar thing. I think you have to experiment, because what sounds really cool when you talk about it, sometimes that thing doesn't actually work when you sit down and try and work out, okay, so how does it actually play? But yeah, I like prototyping. I think it's right for a lot of projects, but I also think you can achieve a lot with just kind of like properly sitting down and thinking through an idea. And yeah, it's cool. It's a good process. I guess my question is, like, so you've played Thomas Was Alone, you played Volume. What do you want me to make next? What would you like to play from me? What would you like me to sit down and work on for a bit?
I think you need to go different. On the spot. You need to go different again, because you've gone platformer. Yeah, and they've done stealth. Yeah, so I think something in a new direction again, maybe sticking to that AI theme we were talking about, would be interesting.
Okay, so a different genre altogether.
Yeah, I think that would be that's the way to go, because you kind of, some developers, like we talked on this series, or we were, depending on which order these go in, we have talked or we will be talking to Rushy from Evolution. And obviously they're very focused on making driving games, and that's what they make. For certain developers that works. But for you, I think it's cool that you're doing a selection of different things, and you need to continue down that path and do something interesting and new. And
I agree with you. I like bouncing around a lot. Yeah.
And the other upside is it doesn't give people the opportunity to get bored.
Yeah, like, absolutely.
People can't be like, oh yeah, Mike Bithell just put out another stealth game. Cool.
Yeah, no, I like the note. I like the note. I'm not gonna express an opinion either way, obviously, but like
that's fine.
I think it's good, and it's something that I really have enjoyed, is kind of bouncing between genres, because it keeps things exciting for me as well, right? Like it's not people feel like, it's so boring when a company makes the same thing over and over, but for a lot of developers, they don't want to work on the same thing over and over. So yeah, but then there's another kind of developer where they want to hone something and very specifically just become an expert in one thing forever and ever. So yeah, horses for courses.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Evolution and they like, we have made cars perfect. Look at these amazing cars we've made. Yeah. And you don't get that if that's the first car game you've ever made.
Correct. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Well, finally, before we wrap things up, obviously you don't have to answer. You can answer this as much or as little as you want to. But how has 2015 been for you on a more personal level? Because we've talked a lot about the business side of things, about volume, and about maybe what you've got coming next a little bit. But how have things been personally this year? Have you had any big milestones?
On a personal level, not really. I've continued a very happy and loving relationship. But there's no kids that I know of or marriage proposals. I'm trying to think of what the big milestones would be. No, this has not been a year of. To be honest, I tend to try. And this is not always possible, but I do tend to only try and have one big job a year. And this year's job was bringing volume out. So maybe next year something like that will happen. But for this year, it's been a nice year personally. But yeah, the focus very much this year was on getting our game out.
Well, I think that's all I've got to ask you about, Mike.
Awesome.
I think that's everything. You've answered all my questions wonderfully.
That's very kind of you to say.
And you've told us about games. I didn't expect anyone. Lego Dimensions was not what I expected to come up, but we have had a couple of things I didn't expect to come up so far. So
that's cool.
People always surprise you. Well, thank you for joining us today, Mike. Have you got any social media type stuff you'd want to pimp at the end of this?
I'm on Twitter. I tend to pimp that one at Mike Bithell. Honestly, I tend to suggest to people that they follow someone who follows me and use that person as a filter, because I tweet a lot of nonsense, and I don't think following me directly is fun. I think you need to follow someone who will retweet the interesting things I say.
Okay.
So that's always my advice.
You need to find like a Mike Bithell filter point on Twitter.
Someone should make a Twitter account purely for that purpose. That is just interesting things Mike Bithell says, which is just like one thing a day.
Oh, that'd be a good project.
Or one thing a week. Someone will do that.
Yeah, just like curated Bithell. That's what you need.
Yeah, I think it needs that extra step, because I'm not going to do it. Because I think it's all gold.
Well, I was going to say, you can't filter yourself.
Well,
That's
exactly.
impossible.
I'm not the person to judge that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, Mike.
No worries.
We will be back soon with more in our Year According to series of podcasts. Goodbye. Bye.
The Sixth Axis Podcast.